Welcome biology students to the Dallas Environmental School District's STEM Environmental Education Center. And we'd like to give a special welcome to the students at the Barack Obama Male Leadership Academy and to biology students at Adamson High School. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We wish you could be here in person, but we're going to do our best to make you feel like you're here during a virtual experience today. If you are watching this and haven't registered for this afternoon's field trip yet, you can still do that by going to www.tiny.cc/EEC register. And once you get there, you can register yourself or your class for this afternoon's field trip. We just use that information for our attendance purposes. Today's virtual field trip is going to be all about genetics. So during this virtual field trip, students will recognize that gene expression is a regulated process and predict possible outcomes of various genetic combinations such as monohybrid crosses, dihybrid crosses, and non-Mendelian inheritance. So we're going to start off this field trip by exploring how gene expression is a regulated process. That's going to be led by Mrs. Fuller. Next, we are going to compare and contrast monohybrid and dihybrid crosses, and that will be led by me. And third, we are going to look at reciprocal cross, Hinny versus a mule with Miss Nash. And last, we are going to look at non-Mendelian inheritance with Ms. Ramirez. While we're doing all of that, you can ask us questions, and we encourage you to ask questions. The way you ask a question during a virtual field trip is by going to www.tiny.cc/EEC-question-answer. And once you get there, you can ask us any questions you have related to genetics. You can ask as many questions as you like, and we will do our best to answer all of them in the time that we have with you this morning. So let me stop sharing my screen here and turn it over to Mrs. Fuller, who will get us started with genetics.
Good afternoon, boys and girls. Whoopsie. This is Lauren. She's going to help me talk about gene expression. So when you go to the grocery store, sometimes you see the eggs in their cartons in clear plastic. And the ones that some are white and some are brown. Well, why are some eggs white and some brown? Well, it's because of a gene expression. So white leghorn chickens lay white eggs. And it's because of a specific gene that's expressed in their bodies. So when they lay eggs, they have white eggs. Buff Orpingtons, on the other hand, lay brown eggs, but the gene that's expressed is a different gene from the gene that is expressed in the white leghorn with the white eggs. This Lauren is an Araucana. She's a South American chicken. Her eggs are a funny color. It's almost olive drab, and it's the same thing. It's because of a gene expression in her body that causes her to have these olive colored eggs. It's not the same gene that's expressed in the white leghorn or that's expressed in the Buff Orpington. It's a different gene. It just happens to be expressed in this girl and the other Araucana. I'm going to set her down. We're going to talk about gene expression and the importance of it. It's the process by which information encoded in a gene is used to direct the assembly of a protein. It's about proteins. It's all about proteins. What proteins are made, how many of them are made, and sometimes gene expression is subdued or turned off. It's a tightly regulated process. It allows a cell to respond to its environment. Gene expression acts like an on-off switch to control when proteins are made. It's also a volume control for how much and the amount of proteins that are made. So let's talk about environment. Well, we can talk about the internal environment, and we also can talk about the external environment. So let's talk about the internal environment first. So one of the major things on the internal environment in the bodies of animals and plants are hormones, and also gender and metabolism, and that's how your body uses energy, gains energy, uses energy, burns burns sugar in the case of people. And now the genes code for hormones, but the hormones regulate the genes. So it's like a little cycle. We've talked about cycles before. So let's talk about steroid hormones. These are the ones that are made from cholesterol. And the first one we're going to talk about is cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that can cause genes to be expressed because it's, well, actually, all these steroid hormones are extremely strong. And one of the cortisol is the fight or flight hormone, the one that when you're in danger causes you either to freeze, to fight them, or to run away. And it can do a lot of damage to your genes and to your body. But it's also part of the immune response. So we can't say, well, let's get rid of all cortisol. It's very important for survival, but it also can turn on us and cause things to be expressed that we don't want to. It's considered a stress hormone. Now, the next one is estradiol, and that is of the three female hormones or three female estrogens, that's the strongest one. And that is real important to mature the female reproductive system and also to maintain pregnancy so the woman doesn't have a miscarriage. The next one is progesterone. This is also a female hormone used to maintain pregnancy. And then finally, testosterone. Now, all people have some estradiol and all people have some testosterone, but women have a whole lot more estrogen than men do. Men have a whole lot more testosterone than women do. But it's very important. The testosterone binds a receptor protein that recognizes a 15-pair base DNA sequence, and it promotes protein synthesis. It promotes the making of proteins. Another steroid hormone is vitamin D. Vitamin D is very important. It regulates the body's level of calcium and phosphorus, and it also helps us maintain our bones. Now let's talk about gene expression as influenced by external environmental factors. So we have things like drugs and light, temperature, what's that other one? Chemicals. All of these things can affect how your genes can be expressed. For example, one particular external environmental factor is radiation. If people get too much radiation, it can make them infertile. It can keep them from having children. Radiation can also cause cancer, can cause some switches to go on within the cells that causes an overgrowth of cell production. Cancer is just the reproduction of cells gone wild, and very often that can be caused by radiation. There's something called fetal alcohol syndrome, which can cause gene expression in the actual physical features of a baby's face or for a small child's face. Doctors can identify people who have been exposed to large amounts of alcohol while in the womb because of that gene expression. Puberty is caused by hormones that turn on the switch in genes that start proteins being manufactured that also control genes and help people mature. And epigenetics is the study of changes in organisms caused by the modification of gene expression rather than alteration of the genetic code itself. There are some genes that people are real worried about now, that there are people who have Alzheimer's that can be carried on a gene, but just because a person takes one of those 1, 2, 3 me tests or ancestry.com and sees that they have a gene for Alzheimer's, it is not, it's not their fate that they will have Alzheimer's unless the gene is expressed. And there are things that people can do to slow down the expression of genes by diet and by exercise and by carrying on various and sundry exercises, mental stimulation that will slow down the expression of that gene. There are other things that people get genetic tests for, and some are more likely to cause a bad problem like Tay-Sachs. It's an inherited disease, but they're now coming up with ways of modifying genes artificially so that the gene cannot be expressed. It's a very deep subject. And if you have any questions about gene expression, Mr. Broughton will be glad to help you with that. Thank you so much. Good day.
Thank you, Mrs. Fuller. The question that came in was, what can I do to control my genes? And there's not a lot you can do to change what genes you've inherited already. You've been born, you've got the genes that you've got. But like Mrs. Fuller was mentioning a minute ago, there are things that you can do, like to prevent Alzheimer's happening to yourself. For example, my parents are worried about that, and so my dad does a lot of puzzles to keep his mind active, and just try to keep your brain as sharp as possible. So even going to school and learning everything you can will help strengthen your brain and could help down the line prevent Alzheimer's. And just like Mrs. Fuller mentioned too, I guess for as far as what genes you might pass on to your offspring, living as healthy as life as possible will help as much as you can, as much as can be controlled, because you can't control what genes you pass on to your offspring as much as maybe you would like, but living a healthy lifestyle will definitely help. All right, now we're going to move on to monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. So let me share my screen here with you, and we'll get started with that. Let me click present here. There we go. All right, so monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. We're going to start off by learning about Freckles the Longhorn Bull. He is a bull that we had here. He's no longer here, but we did have him here for a while. And you can see like some of the traits that he has are that he has horns. He has some red fur, some white fur. He's a pretty good size bull. And that would be the male of this pair here. And then we also have Obsidian, the Black Angus cow. She is one of the cows that we have out here. You can see like her traits are no horns, black fur, all black everywhere. And she is actually a little bit bigger than the bull. She's a really good size Black Angus cow. And about, I guess in March of 2019, they mated and started the process of having a baby. And so that stands for spots. So Freckles has spots on him. You can see like, it's all different colors. Obsidian does not have any spots. She's all a solid color. And when a cow gets pregnant, their gestation period is pretty close to 9 months. And so you can see here on this monohybrid cross, all of the offspring are going to be spots. So because the dominant trait of spots gets passed down every time from the father. The recessive trait won't show up. And on actually exactly December 5, so we're just a few, more than a few, but 5 days away from Oreo's birthday, we had Oreo, the Longhorn Angus cross, born here December 5, 2019. So almost a year ago. And we had little Oreo born. And you can see that she does have spots. So here's a little better picture of her. That was the day she was born. When they're first born, the mom licks them clean, and so she's a little bit, um, I guess, hair's still drying, but she's looking good. There's her with Obsidian drinking milk that very first day she was born. They start eating right away. There she is taking a nap afterwards. Cows are a lot like people. There's the first days they spend a lot of time um, eating and sleeping because they had a busy day getting born that day. And then there's her probably, let's see, 3 or 4 months later. So that's Oreo right there. That's her friend Chocolate. Which Chocolate was actually not born here. We got her from a ranch. But Oreo was born here. So that's what we're discussing right now. And I guess that sheep in the background is Midnight. She is photobombing this picture. She doesn't really need to be in there. And there is a pretty recent picture, I would say late summer. That is Oreo and her mom Obsidian out in one of our pastures, just relaxing during the summer. So she's gotten pretty big now. She would technically be still a calf right now, but once they get to be 1 year old, then they are considered a heifer. A heifer is a female cow that hasn't had a baby yet. And once they've had a baby, then they would be called a cow, which would be Obsidian back there. So again, that monohybrid cross for spots would look like that, where Freckles passed on the trait for spots. If they would have had 4 babies, they would have all 4 would have had spots, but we only had Oreo, so we just saw the one example. Now we're going to move on to some chickens. So this is Prince the Rooster. He is our one of our roosters that we have out here at the Environmental Education Center. You can see he's got a pretty good size comb on him, some white feathers, some kind of reddish feathers, especially really dark red on the wing, kind of a lighter red on the neck and towards the back. And this is Coco the hen. She is one of our hens that we have out here. She has mostly black feathers, some white, not a very big comb because she's not a rooster, she's a hen. And on her tail, especially right here, you're going to notice that these feathers are kind of shiny. She has some really pretty, they in some light they look black, in other light they look green, sometimes they look blue. They kind of change colors in the sunlight. They're really pretty to look at. And they could have some babies. And we're going to use a dihybrid cross to show what kind of offspring they would have. So again, we have Prince the Rooster, he's the male, Coco the hen, she's the female. And this white iridescent means white feathers, but they're shiny. Iridescent is like they shine, like those feathers back here. They can change color in the sun. They appear to change color in the sun. And then there's also black iridescent. And then there's white matte. So his feathers are his are not shiny. They're sort of a flat or matte shade of white, or they could turn out black matte. So this capital W is if white was the dominant trait, and M is if matte is the dominant trait. So that's a white matte traits that he could pass on. Or here's white and not matte, so iridescent. And then here's black with iridescent, and there's black with iridescent traits that could be passed on. And then we'll do the same, it's the same thing going down this way, where they could be white and matte, white iridescent, black, matte, black iridescent. And if we fill that in, the capital W from here goes down, the capital W from here goes down, the capital M, that's going to be a white matte chicken. This again would be a white matte chicken because that capital M is what's going to show up. This would be another white matte chicken and yet another white matte chicken. So all this whole top row is white matte chicken offspring. And then we have, again, white matte. But here's our first different one. This would be white and iridescent, white matte again, white and iridescent. So now out of these first 8, we have 10 that are white and matte and 2 that are white and iridescent. And then we have white matte again, white matte again. There's finally a black but matte chicken. And there's a black but again matte chicken. And then we have white matte, white iridescent. So similar to this one up here, black matte. And here would be the one black iridescent chicken offspring that is possible using this dihybrid cross as the example for these chickens. And that is actually one of the offspring here. His name is Prince Jr. He is mostly black, but he's got those iridescent feathers or kind of shiny feathers to him. So he's kind of a unique guy out here. He's the only black and iridescent chicken that we have. We don't have all the rest of these because we haven't had that many offspring, but his is a 1 out of 16 chance that he would turn out that way. And so there he is. You can kind of see he's got that good size comb to him. He is a male. He's a rooster. He's got these black feathers, some of the red from his dad though. And but they're that shiny kind of bluish green, real pretty color. There's another picture of them. Again, you can see they're always kind of shining in the sun, even though this day was a kind of a partly cloudy day. Those feathers still shine. There's one more picture of them, and that's not really iridescence. That's just the sun shining on his back. Here is more iridescence when you're looking at the color of the feathers. But that is Prince Jr., kind of a unique offspring of those two. And just to summarize real quick then, we have monohybrid crosses. Those are used to predict the outcome of just one trait. So again, that would be the example I used earlier was freckles and obsidian, passing on that trait for spots. And then dihybrid crosses are used to predict the outcome of 2 traits. So you can see it works for vegetables as well as animals with round and wrinkled yellow and green peas, or you could have black or white, iridescent or matte chickens. So I think that is it for my part of this presentation. Let me see if there's any questions. And one came in is, are there other crosses? Yes, so if I actually go back up here, we could have done horns and no horns, where I could have used a capital H for, oh no, it would have been a lowercase h, I'm sorry, for freckles, capital H for obsidian, which would be no horns, and they would have been all capital H with a small h, and the offspring would not have horns. You can see here that Freckles was born with no horns, which the babies often are, but even now that she's a year old, still no horns on her. She's not going to have any horns. She's going to be like her mom with no horns. I guess the reason they breed longhorn cattle with Black Angus cattle, especially for the first birth of the mother, is because a longhorn baby is usually smaller than a Black Angus baby, so it's easier for the mother to give birth her first time using a longhorn instead of a Black Angus bull. All right, now we are going to move on to looking at reciprocal cross with the hinny and the mule with Miss Nash.
Oh, sorry. Okay, there I am. Welcome to my classroom. And today we're talking about a really famous and interesting animal, or 2 animals actually. We have 4 animals really involved in this: the horse, the donkey, and then the hybrid animal. And there are 2 possible hybrids, one the better known mule, and the other the lesser known hinny. So both of those animals are the result of a cross between a horse and a donkey. But it depends on who the mother is and who the father is. So hybrids like a mule or a hinny can only occur between closely related species, We can't have a horse and an elephant or a horse and a bear. But donkeys and horses are closely related. But so they can hybridize. Other animals that can hybridize are, for instance, and this is occurring in nature right now, the polar bear and the grizzly bear. So traditionally, these animals did not encounter each other. But now with the melting of the Arctic ice and the moving, it's getting so much warmer that the grizzly bear can move farther north. And now they're encountering polar bears. And so natural crossing is beginning to occur between these two species of bears. The polar bears evolved in fairly recent times, a few tens of thousands of years ago from the grizzly bear. So they are quite closely related already. Other hybrids that occur naturally in nature are all around us are the dog, wolf, dog, coyote, wolf, coyote hybrids that occur. And these also occur in nature. Now, if we have a male donkey mating with a female horse, a jack and a mare, we get a mule. If we do the opposite, if a male horse, a stallion, mates with a female donkey, a genin, we get what we call a hinny. These hybrids are generally sterile because they have different numbers of chromosomes. A horse has 64, a donkey has 62, a mule and a hinny both have 63. And so because they don't have an even number, they can't usually reproduce in very rare cases. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll look at some of the differences, because the interesting thing here is that even though it's both horse and donkey, equal parts horse and donkey, it matters who the mama is and who the papa is in terms of what the animal looks like. So it's a really interesting example of inheritance being influenced by that, apparently the maternal environment. So I'm going to share my screen here, and you're going to look at some pictures. And this is a really beautiful little mule colt, okay, and his mama. Look at those spots, okay, and look at those ears, okay. So this is a beautiful little colt, a little baby mule, just born a while ago. Now, here's the matchmaker, okay, saying, let me introduce you to your new best friend, okay, a horse and a donkey being introduced, and this would produce a mule. So the mama would be the horse and the papa would be the donkey. So a horse, okay, we can look at this beautiful picture of a horse, okay, beautiful, beautiful animals. Okay, long tail, long mane, fine head, little ears. So remember those characteristics, okay? The mane, the tail, the head, the ears. And then here's a donkey. We can look again, look at those ears, okay, giant ears, okay, have a bigger head. The tail and the mane sticks straight up, and the tail is just has a little bit of long hair at the end, okay? So not a long, luxuriant tail like a horse may have. And then we have our mule. So you can see that they get their size and the body shape from their mama, the mare, the horse. But look at those ears. You'll also notice the muzzle, okay, the nose part is kind of white, like it tends to be in a donkey, but not in a horse, okay? So horses don't often have that kind of a white nose, but donkeys do, and so typically mules do. Also around the eyes, they have that white color like the donkeys do, but again, not the horse. Okay. Here's another beautiful mule. Okay, so again, you can see that the body really looks a lot like a horse, okay, tall and strong. They're much stronger than a horse, okay, the same size horse and the mule will be a lot stronger. They live longer, they've got more endurance, they have what we call hybrid vigor. Okay. Now here is another animal. This one is a hinny. And again, this is the one that the mama was a donkey and the papa was a horse. So the mother, the donkey, would have been a lot smaller. And the offspring, the henny, tends to be, again, smaller. But you see that white nose? Okay, the ears are a little bit bigger than a horse would typically be, but not nearly as big as a donkey or a mule. The tail also looks a lot more like a horse, although the mane tends to be more like a donkey. And I found this picture of a henny on the internet. And I was so astonished because it looks just like our friend that you may have met out here, Jenny, our henny. Okay, people often out here call her a mule, but in fact, and again, remember that picture of one from the internet. And here's Jenny. She's ancient. So Jenny is at least 35, maybe 40 years old. Okay. And they live a long time. But you can see she's got that fine head, more like a horse head, a really pretty head. She's got the white muzzle, and her ears are just a little bit bigger than a horse would be. Her mane is a little bit longer than a donkey, and so is her tail. And she was not very friendly on this day. Here's our friend Eeyore, our donkey. And again, you can see that typical gigantic ears, the white ring around the eyes, the white muzzle. And they're very, very friendly and very intelligent, super intelligent. He used to come for apples. He remembered. Jenny just ran away. Even though all summer long I gave him apples and they would come happily, but that day, I think we scared her in the little 2x4, whatever we were riding on. So you can also cross a donkey and a zebra, and you get a kind of adorable animal there running after its mother, a donkey, or you can cross a zebra with a horse and get a zorse. Okay, again, a really extraordinarily beautiful animal, but apparently untamable. So why have we always had these animals with us? They are really useful for work, that you can do all the farm work. In particular, the mule has been one of the kind of stalwarts of agricultural life. So I'm going to stop sharing, and there we are. So it's an interesting subject, and the interesting thing to think about in this case is the difference between the things that the traits that the mule inherits from the horse and what they inherit from the donkey. And then also what about the henny. So it's a really interesting example of the way the same genetic inheritance can give you different outcomes. In this case, they think it's because of the mother, the influence of the mother on the offspring. So if you have any questions, you can ask Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. The first question that came up was, why don't we know the exact ages of Jenny or Eeyore? And the reason is they were donated to us many years ago. And when the person who gave them to us, when we got them, the person who gave them to us didn't know how old they were. He only had an estimate, and so we can only work off of his estimate because we have no idea when they were actually born, where he was from. And then the other question that came up was, is there such a thing as a liger? And yes, there is. That is another type of hybrid animal that is a cross between a lion and a tiger. All right, now we're going to move on to non-Mendelian inheritance with Ms. Ramirez.
Hello, my name is Ms. Ramirez, and in this segment, we're going to be learning about examples of non-Mendelian inheritance. And essentially what non-Mendelian inheritance is are when genetic traits do not segregate according to Mendel's original principles. So they're essentially exceptions to Mendel's principles. And there's 3 different types that we're going to go over today. The first type that we're going to go over is incomplete dominance. And that is essentially when some alleles are neither dominant and they're not recessive. So what we're seeing here is a mix. So essentially we have a heterozygous phenotype that is showing an intermediate phenotype between the 2 homozygous phenotypes. Now I know that sounds complicated, but essentially let's look at a super easy example. I have some snapdragons here. Snapdragons are a good example of incomplete dominance. So when incomplete dominance occurs with these snapdragons, we might have these red snapdragons mixing with these white snapdragons, and we end up getting an intermediate phenotype, the pink snapdragons. So there are other flowers that also demonstrate incomplete dominance. So it's just when you have alleles that are neither dominant nor recessive, and you're creating sort of like a mix of an in-between. So in this case, we have the red flower and the white flower that are crossing, and we're getting a mix of a pink flower instead. So that's the snapdragons. And then what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a quick little PowerPoint to go over examples of the other types of non-Mendelian inheritance. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys real quick, and we'll pull up the PowerPoint for y'all. So the first thing, we're just going to do another quick review over the incomplete dominance. Other examples of incomplete dominance would be with horses. Now, unfortunately, we don't have horses here, but a good example would be if we had a chestnut brown horse mating with a creamy white horse, and then that would give us a palomino. So you can see we're not getting a brown and we're not getting a white, we're getting something in between, and that's that kind of palomino color that we're seeing. The next type of non-Mendelian inheritance that we're going to look at is codominance. So codominance is when the phenotypes produced are where both alleles are clearly expressed. So we're seeing both traits. So for example, with cattle, in this image, we have a white cow crossed with a red cow, and we're seeing both the white and the red phenotype. And in the cattle industry, we refer to that mix of white and red as a rowan color. Another example would be with ball python morphs. So you see an image over here on the right, we have a white ball python mixed with this kind of like a brown color. So let me show you a quick example. There's lots of different kinds of ball python morphs. And so I was surprised when I was doing research and I was looking at all these cool crosses and all these different interesting color morphs for these ball pythons. So that previous ball python that you see in this picture is a mix of a super Russo ball python and a quin stripe ball python. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stop really quick to give y'all guys a little break, and I'm going to show you guys one of our ball pythons that we have. Now, she's just a normal ball python. She's not one of those fancy color morphs, but it is interesting to think if she were bred with some of those color morphs, what the offspring might be. So this is Pelota, and she's a ball python. Again, she's not the fancy kind. She's just a regular normal morph. But ball pythons are originally from Africa, and they live in the savannas and in the scrublands. They are carnivores. She's not venomous. I wouldn't be holding her if she was, but instead she's a constrictor. So the way that she eats, her mouth is filled with up to 100 recurved teeth, and she uses those teeth to grab onto her prey. And then she will use her strong muscles to squeeze or constrict that prey, and then she will eat it whole. So it's actually quite fascinating to see her when she's eating a mouse or another small rodent. So that's Pelota. She's a ball python. And again, it just got my mind wondering about all the different crazy offspring that she could have if she were mated with some of these other ball python morphs. So I'm going to go back to our screen share so we can finish our PowerPoint really quick. Oops, and let me find my PowerPoint because I think I might have minimized it. There it is. So again, there's tons of those morphs. And then something I wanted to show you guys too is just a cool little calculator on the internet. It's called the Genetic Wizard. And so what you can do is, if you're interested or you like reptiles or you're interested in becoming like a herpetologist one day, there's this cool little website called the Genetic Wizard from the world of ball pythons, and you can choose a male and a female, a different color morph, and you can see what the results would be. So for example, this one, I had my male be an albino faded, and I crossed it with a female, and the morph is called an acid. And when you mix those two together, this website gives you results per percentages of what you could expect the offspring to be. So in this case, half of them would be a albino faded and the other half would be a mix of an acid albino faded. So I thought that was an interesting website to experiment with the different color morphs and offspring as well. And then, so that's co-dominance when we're seeing both those traits show up in the phenotypes. The next type of non-Mendelian inheritance that we're going to look at is polygenetic inheritance, and that's simply inheritance that arises from the interaction of multiple pairs of genes and even environmental factors. So essentially, there's going to be a range of phenotypes. Examples would be things like skin color, eye color, height, and fingerprint pattern. So it's not going to be just tall or short. You're going to see a wide range of different phenotypes. So examples, I said height and also eye color. Again, there's a range of different phenotypes that we can experience for those. And then here's an example of a personal example for me. This is my dog. So this white dog over here is the mother, and then this is my dog, the offspring. Her name is Abby Mittens. And then here is the mother with her litter. So you can see the variety of different fur colors that the litter had. Now, they didn't know who the dad was. So my question would be, what do you guys think the dad looked like, given the appearance of the mother and her offspring? And fur color for some dogs is also a polygenic trait as well. So there's different variations in fur color. And then another example would be height. So this is my family. Height is a polygenic trait. It's not just as simple as short and tall. So there's a range. So my dad is about 6 feet tall. My mom's only 4'8". I am glad that I made it to 4'10". And then my brother is 5'6". So you can see where my family, the height is we're all over the board with our height ranges. So height is a polygenic trait, and I'm just glad that I'm taller than my mother. Another example with us would be hair texture. So hair texture is actually an incompletely dominant trait. So remember a few slides prior. So what that means is for the hair texture, if you cross a person with curly hair and cross it with a person with straight hair, the result would be an intermediate, and that would be a wavy hair. So something with my family is my parents and I both have perfectly straight hair, but my brother has kind of like this kinky curly hair. And so we always wondered where he got that from. Well, apparently my great grandmother had curly hair. So it's interesting to think about your own family genetics and where your traits come from. And then really quickly, just some genetics at the EEC. These are a variety of farm animals that we have. So it was interesting to think about, what did their parents look like, or what might their offspring look like? And then as Mr. Broughton showed us, we had Freckles the Longhorn with Obsidian, and the offspring ended up being Oreo. So you can see how Oreo got some traits from both the mother and the father. This is another example with Sarah, one of our other cattle. She came from another ranch. Her parents, this is not a picture of her parents, but her parents were an Angus. And this is just one of our Angus that we have out here, but it's not her mother. And then we also had Sarah's father was a Holstein. And this, again, it's not a picture of her actual father. This was a Holstein that we have here. But when you mix the Angus and the Holstein, that is what Sarah is. She's a Holstein Angus cross. So you can see the traits that she got from both her parents. And then here's just a quick, both me and Mr. Broughton were talking about Freckles, our Longhorn. He's not with us anymore, but here's a nice little video just so that you can see what it looks like out here at the Environmental Center. Normally when we have kids, they're in the barn, and then we let the kids hand feed them some food pellets. You might have heard one of the cattle over there mooing in the background. But I'm sure the animals sure do miss you guys coming out here, because they miss the kids and eating out of their hands. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it there, and I'm going to stop my screen share. And my last thing is just a quick challenge question. So I found these cool looking flowers at Lowe's yesterday, and there are so many flowers there that are very cool looking. So if you take a look at this flower, my challenge question for you is, what type of non-Mendelian inheritance does this flower represent? So notice, make some observations about the colors that you see, predict what the crosses might have been, and then describe what type of non-Mendelian inheritance this represents. And that's all I have for you guys. We're going to go ahead and pass it back to Mr. Broughton, and he's going to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. I'm going to share my screen and do a quick recap of what we did today. All right, so today's field trip again was all about genetics. During this virtual field trip, students recognized that gene expression is a regulated process, and we predicted possible outcomes of various genetic combinations such as monohybrid crosses, dihybrid crosses, and non-Mendelian inheritance. So we started off with a discussion of gene expression and how that is a tightly regulated process with Mrs. Fuller. I showed us the examples of monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. Third, we looked at reciprocal crosses using the hinny and the mule as our main examples of that with Ms. Nash. And last, we observed non-Mendelian inheritance with Ms. Ramirez. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate you taking the time to learn about genetics with us. We would like you to let us know what you think about this afternoon's field trip, and you can let us know by going to www.tiny.cc/EEC feedback. Once you get there, you can fill out a short feedback form to let us know what you thought about today's trip. We hope to see you at our next one that's coming up. It's going to be after the winter break. And have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.